Welcome back to Briggs on Books, our international talk show where we talk to authors from all over the world about their books. And maybe you're going to find your next read here today. An Element of Choice is a book that's coming out soon. And our author is all the way from Scotland. Welcome, Graham Pryor. Welcome, Graham.
Thank you, Mike.
Now, are you all science fiction in your genres? Are all your books science fiction?
No, cover all sorts of genre. There's politics, history. Most of them have a certain quirkiness about them, just to give them that spice of interest.
And by the way, I have 5 of them here, 5 books. So we won't be able to talk a lot about all of them, but I want to expose all of them to our viewers. But you got one coming out you're working on? The Element,
I'm still working on it.
An Element of Choice. Tell us about that.
It's about reincarnation, really. It's about an old guy's dying. He's terrified of dying. And one night he goes out to let next door's cat into his kitchen, but he finds 5 aliens in the garden. And being a friendly sort, he invites them in for tea.
Okay.
And they sit talking all night, and they discover that he's terrified of death. And they said, "But don't you reincarnate? We all reincarnate, don't you?" And he says, "Not that I'm aware of." And they said, "Well, we'll help you then." So they go through a process where they kill him, but don't finish him off, and he's born again into the same life. But it's not quite the same life. They say to him, "You won't remember your whole life before. You'll just come across things as events spark memories." And eventually he builds up a memory of his previous life because of that. But so the book is a set of stories about these hotspots, as he calls them, when memories occur, and he decides to do something different. His whole approach to life is to choose a different way of dealing with things.
Wow.
What's complicated is that the world he's born into, which is in the 1950s, is the same world, except that there are major changes. For example, in 1937, Britain decided to declare neutrality, so there was no war with Germany. And the USA just had a war with Japan, so everything was very different. And in the 1950s, Britain's very prosperous because it's taken on a lot of German technology. And he's having to deal with that change of environment, but he still remembers slightly what it was like before. But his big problems as a child or as a young boy is that there's a kind of a Hitler Youth in Britain. It's called the Youth Patriots, they call themselves, and he declines to join them, and it causes him a lot of trouble. And he eventually decides, when he's 18, he clears off to France, which in the story is called Frankreich, because it's been taken over by the Germans. Anyway, it's a completely new environment, but he's still got these memories occurring of things that happened, and he has to make another decision. Am I going to let that happen again, or would it be better to do something else? So it's like what many of us do when we're getting older. We look back on life and think, why did I do that? Hadn't I done better to made a different decision? But he's making these decisions. But at the end of his life, which I haven't yet written, he ends back up as a man in his 80s who's ill and dying, and he meets the aliens again, and they've got something to take from him to make him pay for what they've done for him. So it's nice tension all the way through the book. You think, how did he get here? What is the payment that will be exacted? It's been quite fun to do.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing book. When will it come out?
Well, it'll be the end of the year. When that's ready.
A couple more months. Amazing. It's a very UK thing to, if you see an alien in your garden, you invite them in for tea. So,
yeah, well, these aliens, they look like rather nice-looking young women, so you can see why he invited them in.
Nice, yeah. Here in America, we don't invite people for tea. We don't even drink tea, so it's a very Scottish tale. By the way, where are you in Scotland?
I live in a village in Aberdeenshire.
Nice.
Northeast Scotland.
Northeast Scotland, yeah. Now, this one's coming out. I'll put the cover up again. An Element of Change. Of choice? Of change? Choice. Okay. I can't see that far anymore to read there we go, An Element of Choice. And then the one before it, where the world literally went to the dogs. Science fiction, I guess humans ceased to exist and dogs took over?
Well, the humans just don't cease to exist. They are made to not exist by an invasion of aliens who don't want them to go into outer space. It's a bit like going back to the film The World Stood Still. You know, the one with The Day the World Stood Still with Michael Rennie?
Yes.
When he said, we don't want any of you to come out with all your dangerous human activity into other planets. If you do, we'll just burn Earth to a cinder. Well, these aliens are coming to stop it happening. And they're there to unmake the humans.
Yeah.
And at the same time fill the void of the space that humans had as the dominant race, the dominant species. They then endow the dogs, well, all the canines, dogs, wolves, and all the other species, subspecies. They give them a higher intelligence and the ability to communicate, to speak. And the story follows a group of these dogs venturing through the countryside. They've agreed to help the aliens find the last remaining humans. The story is really about them as characters, how they develop with their humour, their observation, their interaction with each other. It's not a typical science fiction story. It's very much a human story, except the humans are not humans, they're dogs.
They're dogs. Very human story. Alba Regained. Tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, this isn't science fiction at all. It's all around the demand for Scotland's independence. And in this story, the English government really upset the Scots by trying to sell off the Scottish National Health Service. And this leads to a rebellion. And there's an actual war brewing between the two. But behind this as well, we have all the problems with climate change. And whilst people are struggling with the political situation, they're also struggling to survive the climate change, which this is set in sort of late 21st century. Things are getting really bad with storms and flooding. And there are these characters who set out to find their leader, the new leader, who they're frightened will be trying to come to some sort of terms of peace with the English. And they pursue him all over Scotland, and whilst they're doing so, they have to encounter the bad weather. It's the middle of summer, and yet there are these great snowstorms which they have to rush through, and they find all sorts of odd things happening within the snowstorm. People appearing who shouldn't be there.
Wow.
The whole thing is a jumble, and at the end, the story isn't finished by a great battle between the two sides. It's finished by an event caused by climate change, a cataclysmic storm. And it destroys so much of England that the Scots think there's no more point fighting to get independence. There's nothing to be independent from. Everything's turned upside down. I like doing that sort of thing.
Yeah. The book could turn out to be prophetic. We'll have to wait and see.
We don't know, it had some bad weather this year.
Man with a Gun, is that your first book?
No. Man with a Gun came just before Alba Regained. Well, that's based on the village I live in, and it's entirely fictional. I hope local people realise that. It's about a man who inherits a lot of money from his father. He finds 3 suitcases in his house in the loft, and they're stuffed with banknotes.
Wow. And
he's then set the task of what is he going to do with it? How can he dispose of them without suspicion? Because he doesn't know where the money's come from or why it was there. Could be totally criminal funding. He always had suspicions about his father. He thought he was a KGB agent at one point, and then he thought he was a drug dealer. So there's this iffy sort of background. But he does manage to team up with an accountant, and they work out how to launder this money through a series of fish and chip shops or burger bars. And he gets involved whilst doing this with a nationalist militia group. They're an illegal group. They masquerade as some political pressure group. They're planning to institute a revolution in the country, and he realizes that they are the source of some of this money, and he's wondering, will they come to get it? Are they violent? And he has to then sort out some means of getting rid of them. He actually joins them for a while, and What they also disclose is that his father was a smuggler. Being on the coast, they had this long tunnel down to the beach where they would bring goods in. Um, and so he's having to deal with the smuggling aspect, the political aspect, and some women who are helping him out, who want him to lead a different sort of life. It's really, when you look at a village community, you think, well, it all looks very peaceful, doesn't it? But is there all this going on in the background? Who's really doing what? Who really are they? And that's what the book brings out.
Nice. There's one more that I have. Is it called Pig?
Pig, yes, that was the first one I had put out with a commercial publisher. That was a fun book, really. In fact, I hope they're all fun books. But that was written as a fun book. It's about a chap who started life as a local thug. And it's based on somebody I knew as a teenager who wrecked a police van. The police parked outside a coffee bar looking for him, and he slipped out the side door, and they left the van unlocked. So he opened the door and put off the handbrake, and the van just shot down the hill into a rock wall. And that was fact. So I based it around this person. But the strange thing was, in real life, I met this person one day dressed in a policeman's uniform, and it turned out that this thug had gone to the other side. And it traces his exploits as a policeman, where he becomes actually quite moral, and is trying to find out who it is who's behind a big drugs bust. And it ranges all over the place. He ends up going to France and coming back with a lot of immigrants in a dinghy, because he's trying to find out who's behind the migrant smuggling. And in the end, they find out that the whole drugs operation has been managed by a load of ministers of the Crown. It's good fun.
It is fun. Graham, we have your web address on the screen here, grahampryor.ampbk.com. What would our viewers find there?
What would you find there? Would you just bits of information about the books and what's coming next?
Nice. And
that's the publisher's website. Yeah.
Can they order the books through that site?
They can do, yes.
Yeah.
Or you can get them through Amazon. All of my books are on Amazon.
Nice. Graham, we've gone way over time. You're so fun to talk to. I just want to give you a minute. Any last thoughts for our viewers about your books or anything in the world you want to talk about?
Well, I just encourage people to read them. As I said earlier, they're all a bit of fun. Nothing terribly philosophical, but there are bits of philosophy in them. Questions are asked and sometimes answered. They'll give you a different window onto life, I think, different versions of life.
Very good. Very good. Graham, Graham Pryor, all the way from Scotland. And did you say Aberdeenshire? How do you say the name?
Aberdeenshire.
Aberdeenshire. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Graham, for coming on the show. Okay. I hope you come again and again. I've enjoyed talking to you this time and the last time. And for our viewers, don't go anywhere, because we're going to be back with another author right after this.
Okay, thanks, Mike.